What's going on, everybody? After 6 weeks of doing absolutely nothing on Genshin Impact, it's finally time for us to get back to the game and check out the new content that just released. Namely, we got a couple new artifact sets, and those are going to be the talk of today's video. But I won't lie, there's a lot of confusion about how these artifact sets work because they, quite frankly, read like a Yu-Gi-Oh card. But today we're going to be going over what these sets do and which characters they're viable on in the Genshin Impact 2.3 patch. I want to start off by talking about the Husk of Opulent Dream set, which is going to be the new Geo-emphasized set that a lot of characters are going to use. This set's extremely relatable. Like many of you, I also am a Husk of a person, or at least I was until I saw Shenhua's hip window. So for all of our empty Husks out there, and now I guess full Husks, let's get right into it. The 2-piece set is going to give you 30% defense, just like the Defender's Will set that's a 4-star set. This gives me a lot of hope for the future that we'll see some 4-star sets converted into 5-star variants, at least the 2-piece sets of them. But yeah, the 2-piece set, really simple. The 4-piece set is something I've heard a ton of confusion on, but don't worry, just like your Primo Gems on patch day, that'll get cleared up. I actually tested this myself to make sure everything for this video is correct. If you want to test it for yourself because you just don't believe me, because for some reason people don't, you're more than welcome to, but just know that I've tested this myself. So the 4-piece set gives defense and geo damage bonus based on stacks. When a character is on the field, they can get a stack once every 0.3 seconds for dealing geo damage, meaning geo carries can get max stacks without switching out. There is a maximum of 4 stacks, which means you can get up to 24% geo damage bonus and 24% defense bonus on top of the 2-piece set, which gives 30% defense already. The other way of getting stacks is to have that character off field, where they'll get a stack once every 3 seconds. Now, a lot of people were confused on this and thought that they would have to deal off-field geo damage to get the stacks, but literally all it takes is them being off the field for 3 seconds and they get a stack. You could just run around with 3 characters in your party having this set on, and they would all just constantly have 24% geo damage and 24% defense bonus. It's really, really good. The end of the passive also states that when 6 seconds pass without getting a curiosity stack, 1 stack is lost. However, when you're off the field, you're not going to be losing any stacks at all, because every 3 seconds the game registers you gaining a stack, which means that you basically just are never losing stacks while off the field. Stacks also have a nice counter on them when you're on the field, so you know exactly how many you have. So we're only going to go over defense scaling characters because that's who the set is made for, but we will be going over all defense scaling characters. So let's start with Noelle. So for Noelle, at C0 through 5, the 2-piece is fine. The 4-piece is not as good for her before C6 because she doesn't need as much defense for her elemental burst scaling. Like if you're building her as a carry, it's still going to technically be better for you to build her like a standard DPS, and thus the gladiator set would be much better. However, at C6, it is Noelle's best in slot. Her current best in slot options are 4-piece gladiators and 4-piece retracing bolide, and while retracing bolide feels like the better overall set, technically 4-piece gladiators can get you more damage, but it's worth noting that you can't use Noelle's charge attacks as effectively with gladiators, and as a result, clearing waves of enemies can be a bit slower with gladiators. One of the nice things about Husk is that most of its effect is relatively unconditional. You get 30% defense no matter what, and you just sort of get Noelle's stacks for playing her. So as far as convenience goes, it feels really nice to play, and it also will make Noelle's shields a lot stronger with the defense increase. However, Husk makes less of a difference when you use White Blind or Goro with Noelle, just because of defense stacking being worth less overall than getting raw damage bonus from something like Serpent Spine, Bolide, or Gladiator. But the easiest way to say it is, if you already have a super strong set for Noelle, I personally wouldn't farm Husk for her, but if you haven't farmed a solid set for her yet, it will be worth it, absolutely 100%. And if you're a Noelle main, you're already in that domain farming as we speak, so I don't gotta tell you guys. The verdict? Good on Noelle. Now let's talk about Albedo. Albedo's kind of had this problem where he never really had a dedicated set to him. There was a lot of sets that do work on him. You could use 4-piece Noblesse, 2-piece Noblesse, 2-piece Petra, 4-piece Archaic Petra, 4-piece Tenacity. There was just a lot of options if you wanted to make Albedo do decent damage. But finally with this set, he has a set that actually just increases its damage substantially and makes it worth farming for him. So the 4-piece Husk set is his new best in slot. It gives him a massive damage increase overall in comparison to all of the set counterparts. And in a majority of teams, we found that using the 4-piece Husk set was actually better for your overall team damage output than using something like Tenacity to buff your other characters. I'll talk about that more in depth when I get to my Albedo guide, which should come out on Thursday once we have access to Cinnabar Spindle, just so I know exactly how the weapon works so I don't give you guys any misinfo. Something that a lot of people miss when they're talking about Albedo, if they're not a theory crafter, is that Albedo's elemental skill actually does a lot more damage when you build it over building his elemental burst. So even though his elemental burst will lose a lot of damage, the amount of damage you're gaining on his elemental skill just for existing and being off field is worth it and makes this set his best in slot easily. So now let's talk about Itto. Though we don't officially have concrete numbers on his scalings, it's pretty much assumed this will be his best set, since the dev stream said he'd be scaling off of defense and will be able to gain stacks while being on the field, as we tested earlier. Retracing Bolide might also be decent with him, but for now, assume you're going to be farming this set for Itto, and double check Itto mains if you want to see for yourself, if you want to see all those numbers, because I'm not allowed to talk about it. A lot of people have actually asked me about Goro on stream at twitch.tv/Braxophone. Go make sure to follow if you want to see live content. And while I do think it'll actually improve Goro's damage a lot. I don't necessarily know that we're going to try to build Goro for damage himself. Based on his character trial from his hangout, you can actually see his skills ahead of time, and we can tell that Noblesse is probably going to be a better set on him most of the time. However, we might also see him with Archaic Petra in the future. Stay tuned for the Goro guide when we get our hands on him and get to actually test him in a lot of optimal situations. For now, I can pretty confidently say that this set is not going to be Goro's best in slot. But the final defense scaling character that I wanted to talk about for this set is Xinyan. And no, it's not a meme. Xinyan C6 actually scales off of defense, which allows her to be built for defense and still do decent spin bot damage. This set is overall just a really big buff to her shield, but it still is kind of made out of paper. For that reason, I think you would be much better off focusing on her physical damage output rather than her defense and making her into a shield bot. But if for some reason you do want to build her as a shield bot, you can use this set and it will actually be pretty effective in buffing your defense. Overall, the Husk of Opulent Dreams set that I thought was going to be pretty copium initially ended up being pretty dang solid after testing, and now we know through numbers that it's going to be great with a lot of the defense scaling characters in the game. But of course, to have a set that's worth farming after you already have so many other sets farmed up on Genshin Impact, the artifact domain has to be relatively resin efficient. So I want to look at the second set that's actually available in the same exact domain, which is going to be a healing focused set. This set's called Kokomi Only, or Ocean-Hued Clam for short, and it has a 2-piece set effect that gives you a healing bonus that's 15%, just like Maiden Beloved, but the 4-piece set is going to give you a DPS increase based on a separate game mechanic that we haven't seen before. So essentially, it's going to put a little seafoam bubble up right above your character's shoulder whenever a character with this set does any sort of healing. And this includes overhealing, so any characters that are wasting healing by healing kind of an unnecessary amount get a benefit out of it. The seafoam will last about 3 seconds, and based on the amount of HP that gets healed in this time, the seafoam will deal damage to nearby opponents equal to 90% of that accumulated healing in the form of physical damage. The maximum amount of healing it can get is 30,000 HP, but for someone like Kokomi who already heals so dang much just in the nature of building her as a DPS, this is actually fine. And just as a little cherry on top for this set, you do get activation when the character is off the field, so if you use something like Kokomi's elemental skill and drop a jellyfish on the field, even if she's not on the field, all of that healing will turn into extra damage for you. The damage is affected by resistances because it's physical damage and for some reason not true damage, which essentially means that you can use Superconduct and other physical damage resistance debuffs in order to make it do more damage. I actually wanted to test this to see if piling on healing from other characters would affect the seafoam damage, and I found that it doesn't affect the seafoam damage at all if you start healing with other characters. It is literally based on only the character that has it equipped, and because only one seafoam can be up at a time, you can't do any like fun shenanigans or anything with it. In an absolute best case scenario, this will actually get you close to 9k DPS extra, which is also AoE, so it can even become more than that. So now that I've kind of explained what I found based on testing and how the set actually works, we're going to talk about the characters that it works best on. First off, I want to talk about Jean, and the reason why I do not recommend this set for her. Jean can overheal a lot, and I have no doubt in my mind that she would cap out on the seafoam health and deal lots of extra damage, but the main issue with this set on Jean is that Jean just has access to better tools. Because Jean's Animo, she can use the 4-piece Viridescent Venera set, which gives resistance shred, which overall will contribute to your team's damage a lot more than any sort of 9k DPS from the seafoam. Viridescent Venera is just such a unique tool that it's really hard to pass up on any characters that can use it. That's why when I'm looking at Sayu, I see the same issue. She can also use Viridescent Venera, and her healing is considerably lower than Jean's, which means that you're not going to want to put the Clam set on her either. However, as far as our cryo characters like Qiqi and Diona actually can get good use out of the set. One problem that a lot of people had with Qiqi is that it seems like MiHoYo over-invested into her healing capabilities without giving her much else in her kit. However, if you're going to hyper-invest in her healing abilities, you'll be able to get the maximum damage out of the seafoam set, which will ultimately up your team's damage as a result. Because the seafoam's damage is affected by physical resistance drain, you can use a Superconduct team with Qiqi, you can use something like Eula and Qiqi on the same team, with maybe Raiden as the battery to make sure that Eula can actually get her burst up, and the seafoam damage will be increased when it lands on enemies just because you have so much physical resistance shred. I would like to add though, however, that Qiqi can use Tenacity of the Millith, which can end up being a lot better for your team depending on the team that you're running, specifically with melee characters. If you're using a ranged character with Qiqi, it's kind of counterintuitive, and I wouldn't recommend Tenacity, but she does have the option for Tenacity that other characters don't, so if you're looking for an attack buff, I would recommend that over the new set for her, but the new set can work. Meanwhile, Diona is focused on shields and heals, but if you invest into her heals more, you actually get a lot of benefits out of it. The thing is that Diona doesn't actually have dedicated sets for her. She just has a bunch of half sets that she can use to get the most out of her kit right now. It's basically just bonus stats. However, this set could actually work fairly well on her. Though her low investment healing isn't super amazing, if you do high invest into her, you'll actually be able to get damage out of her, which is something that not everyone's able to do, because overall Diona's damage output is just really low, so the seafoam kind of forces that. And since with C6 Diona, you're going to be standing in her healing field for the 200 EM boost anyways, it would make sense that this set's actually viable on Diona. You probably won't be maxing out on the seafoam damage every time, but the extra damage will be helpful overall. But let's move on to some other characters now, like Bennett. I'm just kidding, we're not going to do that, that's dumb. Not only is Noblesse Noblesse just Bennett's best set no matter what the situation is. Even if you're building him as a DPS, you might as well just give him Noblesse anyways because it works so well with his burst. This set, the Clam set, literally just doesn't work on him because his healing just stops at 70%. So it doesn't count as overhealing when it goes to that 70% threshold. It literally just doesn't heal at all, which means that you're not getting any damage to add to the Clam set in the first place. So just don't use it on him. Just stop. How about Noelle though? Well, Noelle is actually a really capable healer, but because the Husk set just dropped, you don't want to give up on that. Give her the Husk set. She gets a stronger shield and stronger heals for it, and higher damage potential. Definitely highly recommend Husk over the Clam set for Noelle. As mentioned before, Kokomi is going to have a very easy time with this set because, well, to be honest, it was tailor-made for her. And overall, for damage output and healing utility, this will definitely be her best set. But I do want to note that Tenacity is a seriously good set on her, and I'm still going to be running that on my Kokomi, even though this new set is out, because I don't really care as much about Kokomi's damage. Her healing is already very good, even without the healing bonus. And in a supportive role, it's much more important that I get the 20% attack buff to my team passively than help Kokomi do more damage. So I'd only recommend the set if you're building her as a DPS healer hybrid, but not as a support hybrid. But the big one I wanted to talk about is actually Barbara, because I feel like it's actually very good on her. It actually does a lot of work. Like, since Barbara can heal a ton already, and she can be off field, and she can apply Hydro for melee characters, it's actually a pretty solid fit for Barbara and getting some extra damage in your team, because that's one of the biggest problems with running Barbara is that she doesn't do any damage with her burst, and she doesn't really do any damage with her elemental skill either, so she's basically just like an empty slot that slightly heals you. But with this set, she'll be able to be a dedicated healer, hydro applier, and slight damage dealer. It's not going to be insane damage, but it's going to be helpful. So overall, this set on a lot of characters can be decent, but the problem is that a lot of characters have alternative sets that are better for them and for their damage output and for helping the team. So while the set isn't that bad, it's still not that worth farming in my opinion, unless you're building any of those characters that I mentioned that it works well with, like Barbara, Kokomi, maybe Chi-Chi or Diona. It's definitely an upgrade to Maiden Beloved, but then the problem there is that you get maidens from the Viridescent Venerer domain, so if you're just looking for dedicated healing, you're gonna already run into good pieces of another artifact set there, and it's technically more resin efficient in my opinion. So the final question is it worth farming either of these sets? And ultimately, it will just depend on what teams you're building, but if you're building any sort of geo-focused team, I can say with confidence that the Husk set is going to be something you're gonna want to farm. But as far as the new healing set, it's not going to really be best in slot on many people. Arguably, it's kind of best in slot on no one, even Kokomi, just because Tenacity is such a good set to have on her. But because of how good the Husk set is on so many Geo characters, it is worth giving up your resin in order to build Geo characters. I think the new Husk set is actually very strong. However, I think the new healing set is similar to Maiden Beloved, except it adds damage to your team. But farming that domain isn't a complete waste of time, unless you're Braxophone and you spent 30 fragile resin on this domain and only got 1 defense sands and 10 elemental Anyways, I hope this helped you guys figure out if you want to farm for the new sets or not. I go live on Twitch a few times a week at twitch.tv/Braxophone with Genshin content and some variety games, so if you're interested in that, come stop by. And make sure to subscribe down below if you want to see more videos like this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.